opening scene of your book is the most crucial part of your story. Not the plot, not the characters, and not the setting. Now, I know we've all been there. We've all thought we've come up with the next New York bestseller until it's time to open up the document and actually start writing.
Prepare to be written!
I know I've been there. I've spent hours sitting at my computer, staring at a blank page trying to come up with the perfect opening scene.
Done. Now let's see how it looks so far. The time!
Well, by the end of this video, you'll be equipped with all the knowledge to allow you to create an opening scene that'll hook your readers from the get-go. Hey, what's up guys? It's LDJ Writes here, and the D stands for dynamic, because in today's video, I'm going to show you how to write a dynamic opening scene that will hook your reader from the first page, or even the first line in some cases. Now, after your title, summary, and book cover, the first line or the first opening paragraphs of your story are crucial to get right. If you do not nail these, you run the risk of losing the majority of your readers before they even buy your book. Think of all your favorite books, movies, and TV shows. What's the one thing that they have in common? They all open on scenes that serve as great hooks for the larger story that they're trying to tell. But before we start, I probably need to define what exactly a hook is. A hook is a compelling opening that grabs your reader's attention immediately. Sometimes it's just the first line, or sometimes it's the first opening paragraphs. Think back to school when your teacher would make you write an essay. You would often have to start your essay off with a hook. If you were like me, you often started off your essays with some outlandish question that grabbed your reader's attention. Well, you want to think about your hook like that. Your hook needs to inspire some kind of intrigue or cause your reader to ask some question that can only be answered if they continue to read your story. Now, while doing research for this video idea, I came to the conclusion that there were three main components of a good hook. I came up with a kind of acronym for them, ICE, and it stands for intrigue, conflict, and emotion. Starting off with intrigue, your hook needs to, like I said before, make your reader ask questions about your book. And they need to be good questions. Not questions like,
why am I reading this, or how does this even pertain to the plot?
No, the questions that they need to be asking are, what's going to happen to your character, or where's the plot going to go next, or why is this happening? Your reader needs to be asking good questions that will inspire them to keep reading your story. Your hook also needs to introduce some sort of conflict to your story. It may not have to be the entire central conflict of your book, but there needs to be some conflict in your story. I like to think of the hook as a smaller snapshot of the larger narrative that you're trying to tell. For example, in Indiana Jones, most of his stories start off with some adventure that he's going on, which serves as a much smaller scale for the larger story that he's a part of. Think of the conflict in your hook as a gateway or a peephole into the larger story that you're trying to tell. Your hook needs to elicit some kind of emotion in your reader. You need to make us care about your characters early on, because your hook also needs to be setting up your most important characters. Now, the emotion can be whatever emotion you want it to be. It can be anger, confusion, or excitement. The emotion that you choose doesn't really matter. You just need to make the reader feel something, because once the reader starts to feel something about your characters in your book, they're going to be more inclined to keep reading. Now, some examples of good hooks that employ all three of these components that I can think of off the top of my head would be the Percy Jackson show and the books, the Dark Knight movie, Fight Club, 1984 by George Orwell, and The Hobbit by Tolkien. Each of these titles that I just named employ each of these three components when they were creating their hook. You can see the success that they've garnered over the years, so obviously they must be doing something right. I'm sure you have a bunch of books in your house somewhere. Open one of your favorite ones and read the first line. Study it. What about that first line made you want to keep reading? What did it do well? What kind of questions did it make you answer about the book? Think about all of these things in your favorite book in the first line, and try to break down the first line or the first scene into its bare components, and try to utilize these elements when writing the opening to your own story. Now that we've established what a hook is and what some examples of good hooks are, it's time to talk about what bad hooks look like. Now, the following examples that I'm going to show you aren't from anything specific or from any book that I've read, but they're an amalgamation of things that I've seen in a lot of newbie writing. And believe me, I've been a newbie writer before, and I've probably done all of these things in previous stories that I've written. but it's important to notice your flaws when you see them and to improve where you can. Now, my first example of a bad hook is it was a sunny day in the city and everyone was going about their business. Now, this hook isn't terrible, but it doesn't really make the reader ask any questions about the overall story that you're trying to tell. It doesn't elicit any emotion, and it definitely does not introduce any conflict. Another bad example of a hook would be John woke up and brushed his teeth. This one's even more boring than the last, and it doesn't tell us anything about your story or John. Now, while these are bad examples of hooks, it's really easy to turn both of these examples into great hooks. For example, with the first one, instead of saying it was a sunny day in the city and everyone was going about their business, instead you could say it was a sunny day in the city until the sun disappeared from the sky. Now, this isn't the greatest rewrite, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, but even that makes me ask the question of, well, what happened to the sun? I mean, if the sun disappeared from the sky, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have questions. And as for the second example, instead of saying John woke up and brushed his teeth, you could say John woke up, brushed his teeth, and realized he hadn't woken up in the same universe he'd fallen asleep in. Again, this is not the perfect example of a great hook, but it already has me asking questions about how does John not know he's in the right universe, or what exactly tipped him off. Now, these two examples are for more speculative fiction stories, but you can employ these tactics for almost any genre you can think of. The main goal of your hook is to grab your reader's attention and make them ask questions. Once they start asking questions about your book, they have no choice but to keep reading so that those questions get answered. A common piece of advice when writing your story opening that I've seen often is to start with action, and I would generally agree with this. However, action doesn't always have to be something physical or like a fight scene or like a chase or anything like that. When people say start with action, they really just mean start when something is happening. Something needs to be happening in order for your reader to be engaged. If nothing's really happening and you're kind of just listing off a wall of text, or you're just starting with description or an info dump or a bunch of lore that no one really cares about, you're not going to grab your reader's attention, and they're most likely not going to want to continue reading your book. When you start with action, something needs to be happening and you need to engage your reader as early as possible. While doing research for this video, I also came to the conclusion that there are 3 common types of hooks that I've seen throughout most pieces of fiction media. The most common one that I've seen is the use of the inciting incident. In this type of opening, everything changes for your main character. It often starts off the main plot and kicks everything into high gear. In a rom-com, this would be the meet cute where your protagonist meets their love interest. In a sci-fi story, this might be where a spaceship lands on a desolate planet or aliens start invading the Earth. The use of the inciting incident is great for fantasy stories, science fiction stories, and action stories, but they can really be used across any genre if done right. The second most common type of opening that I've seen in stories is the flash forward. Now, while this one isn't my personal favorite, I can see why it can be effective. Jumping ahead in time to a more compelling and interesting scene rather than starting off with a more slower paced opening can really do well to get your reader engaged, and it can also encourage them to get through that more slower paced opening that you may have planned later on down the road. Working your way backward from an exciting point in the plot is a great way to get your readers invested and engaged with your characters early on. Now, an example that I'm thinking of off the top of my head would be Ratatouille, where the first scene starts with Remy with a freeze cut with him with the cooking book over his head as he's running away from that crazy old woman.
This is me. I think it's apparent I need to rethink my life a little bit. What's my problem? First of all, I'm a rat.
That would be a great example of a flash forward, as it immediately makes us wonder, how the hell did Remy get in this situation? Or if you want a more modern example of the flash forward, think of the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie if you have seen it. That movie starts off with the crazy action set piece, and the movie then works its way back towards the beginning and then makes its way back to that part of the action scene, and then it continues from there. Both of these methods of using the flash forward can work really well to engage your reader and make them invested before your story actually starts. And the third opening that I've seen the most is called the threat teaser. and this one's probably my favorite one out of the three. It's mostly employed in horror or mystery and thriller stories, and it usually is told in the point of view of someone other than your protagonist. A good example of the threat teaser would be a murder taking place, but from the point of view of the murderer. The threat teaser is a great way to open up your story because it immediately engages your reader and throws them in the deep end while establishing a sense of urgency early on. If you get to the danger of the story and what's waiting for your character down the road, it'll make your reader more inclined to want to get to that point where your character faces this danger head on. The key to writing a great hook is to start strong, throw us straight into the action, and make the reader engage with your story as early as possible. Remember, when your reader opens your book, they're expecting an experience and you're being expected to deliver. Your opening scene is your first shot at making sure that you fulfill your reader's promises. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it really helps me in the algorithm and lets me know that you guys are enjoying this kind of video. If you guys would like to see more of this type of video, make sure to subscribe because I've got tons of different ideas on how you can write your story and make it so much better coming in the future. And if you've got any writer friends who are struggling with how to write their opening scene, make sure to share this video with them, as I'm sure it'll help someone out there. I've been LDJ Writes, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.